Clara owned a small bistro in a quiet part of town. Life had not been kind to her lately, and she was struggling to keep her business afloat. Despite her efforts, the bills were piling up, and she could barely make ends meet. One evening, as the rain poured heavily, an elderly man walked into the bistro. Clara, though exhausted, looked up and greeted him. She could tell right away that he was in need, though she had nothing to spare herself. She guided him to a table near the window and gave him a menu. He was hesitant, but Clara insisted that he choose whatever he liked. She didn't want to see him go hungry. "Don't worry about the cost," she said softly, offering a reassuring smile. "I'll take care of it." The man looked up, surprised. His voice trembled as he thanked her, but Clara could see that he was embarrassed to accept help. Still, she felt something inside her tell her that this was the right thing to do. Clara returned to the kitchen and began preparing a warm, hearty meal. She wanted to give him something that would not only fill his stomach, but also lift his spirits. As the meal cooked, Clara thought about her own struggles, how she had worked tirelessly to keep the bistro open after losing her husband. She thought of her two children, Jason and Emma, who were at home waiting for her. They needed new clothes for school, but she could barely afford to feed them. The man finished his meal slowly, savoring each bite. When he finished, he placed a small note on the table before standing up to leave. Clara quickly tried to stop him, but he just smiled and walked out into the rain, disappearing into the night. Clara walked over to the table where the man had been sitting. She expected to find a tip, maybe some loose change, but what she found took her completely by surprise. On the table was a folded piece of paper. Clara's hands trembled as she opened it. It wasn't money, instead it was a note, written in neat handwriting. She read it several times, each time her heart beat faster. It wasn't just a thank you note, it was a business card with a letter attached. The note was from Robert, the elderly man. He had written, "I have been watching your bistro for a while. I see the care you put into your food and the warmth you show your customers. You are exactly the kind of person I've been looking for." The letter went on to explain that Robert had worked as a financial advisor for a large investment firm. He had seen potential in Clara's small bistro and wanted to help her expand. "I believe in what you're doing," Robert wrote, "and I have connections in the restaurant industry. I can bring investors who will help you grow your business. I will return tomorrow to discuss it further." Clara stared at the paper in disbelief. Her mind raced as she tried to process the unexpected turn her life had taken. Could it really be possible? She kept the note, carefully folding it and placing it in her pocket. That night she stayed up late, cleaning the bistro, thinking about what the future might hold. The next day Clara arrived at the bistro earlier than usual, eager to see if Robert would return. She baked extra bread and brewed fresh coffee, trying to prepare for whatever would come. Around midday the door opened and Clara's heart skipped a beat. Robert walked in, but this time he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by a group of well-dressed people in business suits. The investors sat down at different tables, ordering from the menu. Clara's nerves were on edge as she prepared the food, but she made sure to put extra care into every dish. "Everything looks wonderful," one of the investors said, glancing at the menu. "The food here is fantastic." Robert walked around the bistro, showing the investors the space. He smiled at Clara, his eyes twinkling with approval. "This is where the magic happens," he said, gesturing to the kitchen. After a couple of hours, the investors left, and Robert came up to Clara. "We want to invest in your bistro," one of them said. "We see the potential in your food, and we think your business can grow. We'd like to help you open more locations around the city." Clara couldn't believe what she was hearing. It felt like a dream, but the faces of the investors made it clear that this wasn't just a fantasy. She stood there stunned as Robert explained the next steps. The investment firm would handle the logistics, but Clara needed to make some decisions about how to expand. "We can help you find the best locations," one of the investors said. "You'll be able to open multiple bistros around the city, and we'll make sure each one is just as successful as the first." Clara felt her heart race. This was more than she had ever imagined. She had always dreamed of expanding, but now it felt real. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. "I want to make this work." The investors smiled, exchanging looks of approval. Robert stepped forward and placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "I knew you were the right person for this," he said warmly. Over the next few weeks, Clara worked tirelessly to get the first expansion off the ground. The investors helped her find the perfect location, and soon she was overseeing the construction of a second bistro in a busy part of the city. At first, it was overwhelming. The demands of managing two bistros were far greater than she had anticipated. She was constantly running between locations, overseeing staff, and making sure everything was running smoothly. But Clara was determined. With Robert and the investors' support, she pushed through the challenges. She learned to delegate tasks and trust her team. One evening, after a particularly hectic day, Clara sat down at the bar of her first bistro. She had just finished checking on both locations, and her feet ached. Robert appeared beside her, a warm smile on his face. "You're doing great," he said, sitting down next to her. Clara gave him a tired smile. "It's hard, but I think I'm getting the hang of it." "You're more than getting the hang of it," Robert replied. "You're building something that will last. This is just the beginning." Clara looked at him, feeling a surge of gratitude. She couldn't have done it without his help, and now it seemed like everything was finally falling into place. Robert raised his glass. "To success," he said, his eyes gleaming with pride. Clara clinked her glass against his, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "To new beginnings," she said. As the weeks passed, Clara's second bistro opened to rave reviews. The city was buzzing about her innovative menu, and word quickly spread. Business was booming, but with success came new pressures. Clara found herself overwhelmed by the sheer scale of her ambitions. One evening, Clara sat alone in her office, staring at a pile of paperwork. The numbers were good, but the weight of it all was starting to get to her. Robert entered, knocking lightly on the doorframe. "Need a break?" he asked, his tone warm but knowing. Clara let out a long breath, standing up and stretching. "I don't know how to balance it all. Between the bistros, the investors, and the expansion, I feel like I'm losing control." Robert walked over to her desk, his face serious. "You don't have to do this alone, Clara. You've built something amazing, but that doesn't mean you have to carry the entire weight on your shoulders." Clara looked at him, feeling a mixture of gratitude and guilt. "I know, but I feel like if I don't push myself, I'll let everyone down." Robert placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Clara, you're doing great, but you need to start trusting others with more responsibility. Delegate, let your team help you." Clara nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. "I've been afraid of losing control," she admitted, "but maybe it's time to let go a little." Robert smiled and nodded. "Exactly. It's about finding balance. You're not just a manager, you're a leader, and leaders know when to trust their team." Clara took a deep breath, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she wasn't carrying the entire burden alone. The next day, Clara called a meeting with her team. She explained the challenges she had been facing and how she needed their help to continue growing the business. To her surprise, her team was incredibly supportive. They offered ideas for improvement, agreed to take on more responsibility, and assured Clara that they were in this together. Clara felt a sense of empowerment. With her team by her side, she no longer felt like she was alone in this journey. The weeks that followed were transformative. Clara allowed her team to take more control over the day-to-day operations, while she focused on expanding the brand even further. Soon, Clara's business was flourishing. Her bistros were thriving, and she was becoming known as a visionary leader in the restaurant industry. Looking back, Clara realized that the turning point came not from pushing harder, but from learning to trust and share the load. And as she watched her team celebrate the grand opening of the third bistro, Clara knew this was only the beginning of something even bigger. With the third bistro now open, Clara felt a sense of pride. It had been a challenging journey, but every hurdle had taught her something new. She sat at her desk, reviewing the numbers and thinking about the next steps. The demand for her bistros had outpaced expectations, and now she needed to think bigger. Robert entered her office once again, his familiar presence bringing a sense of comfort. "What's on your mind?" he asked, taking a seat across from her. Clara smiled, a little tired but content. "I'm thinking about the future. The bistros are doing well, but I'm wondering what's next. How can I make this even bigger?" Robert leaned back in his chair, his hands clasped in front of him. "You've already created something incredible, Clara, but sometimes the next step isn't always obvious." Clara nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about expanding to new cities, maybe even opening a few in other countries." but I'm not sure if it's the right time yet. Robert smiled, sensing her hesitation. It's normal to feel uncertain, but I've always believed in your ability to take calculated risks. You've proven time and again that you can handle it. Clara took a deep breath. You're right. I've taken risks before, and they've paid off. Maybe it's time to think even bigger. I'll need the right partners, though. Robert raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What kind of partners are you thinking about? Clara smiled, her mind racing with possibilities. I'm considering investors who share my vision, people who understand the industry and have the resources to help me scale. I need people who believe in the brand, not just the money. Robert nodded, impressed by her clarity. I think you're on the right track, and if you need help finding the right people, I know a few connections who might be able to assist. Clara felt a surge of confidence. With Robert's support, she knew she could take the next step. Thank you, Robert. I'll start putting a plan together. It's time to take this brand to the next level. The days that followed were filled with meetings and strategy sessions. Clara meticulously researched potential investors, carefully choosing those who aligned with her vision. As the week drew to a close, Clara found herself sitting across from a group of investors who shared her passion and enthusiasm for growth. We're ready to take this brand global, Clara said, her voice steady and confident, and I want you to be a part of it. The investors exchanged looks, then nodded in agreement. We're in, one of them said. Let's make this happen. Clara smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had built this from the ground up, and now it was time for the next chapter. As she left the meeting, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of possibility. The world was full of opportunity, and she was ready to seize it. Clara's vision was becoming a reality. With the investment secured, she quickly set her sights on the international market. She and her team traveled to different countries, exploring potential cities for the bistros. They visited bustling metropolises, quiet coastal towns, and everything in between. Each place had its unique charm, but Clara knew that her bistros needed to adapt to local cultures to succeed. During a trip to Tokyo, Clara met with a potential partner, Saito, a local entrepreneur who had extensive experience in the food industry. I've heard a lot about your bistros, Clara, Saito said with a smile, his sharp eyes gleaming with interest. Your concept is new to Japan, and I think it could really catch on here. Clara nodded, feeling a surge of excitement. That's why I'm here. I want to bring the bistro concept to Japan, but I need someone who understands the market. Saito leaned forward, clearly intrigued by her proposal. I think I can help with that. I know the right locations and I have connections with local suppliers. Together, we can create something special. Clara smiled, feeling a sense of reassurance. Let's make it happen. I've always believed in collaboration. Let's build something amazing together. Over the next few months, Clara and Saito worked tirelessly to set up the first bistro in Tokyo. They carefully selected a location in a vibrant district known for its fashionable crowd. The grand opening was a huge success. The lines outside the bistro were long, and customers flooded in, eager to try the unique fusion of local ingredients with Clara's signature dishes. Clara watched with pride as the restaurant filled with happy patrons. She had done it. She had taken the first step towards creating a global brand. As the months passed, Clara continued to expand, opening bistros in other cities around the world. Each new location brought its own set of challenges, but Clara was ready for them. In London, she collaborated with local chefs to develop a menu that incorporated British flavors while maintaining the essence of her original vision. In Paris, she worked with French culinary experts to create a menu that celebrated the rich gastronomic traditions of the city, adding her own twist to familiar classics. With every new opening, Clara's bistros became more successful. She had created a brand that transcended borders, one that blended cultures and cuisines from around the world. Yet, as the business grew, so did the pressure. Clara had to juggle her time between overseeing operations in multiple countries, managing her team, and maintaining her own well-being. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed, but she reminded herself of the vision that had started it all. She was building something bigger than herself, a legacy that would last for generations.